On an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco stood the city of Tenochtitlan. With over 200,000 inhabitants, it was one of the largest cities in the world, being nearly 5 times the size of Henry VIII's London. This was the epicenter of the Aztec Empire, which had expanded to an estimated population of over 5 million in the last 100 years. At its heart was the palace of Moctezuma II, a grand building containing 2 zoos, an aquarium, and a botanical garden. In one of its many richly decorated rooms stood the throne of the fire serpent. Fashioned from volcanic stone, the surface is carved with reliefs of terrifying gods and rituals of human sacrifice. Moctezuma, a stern-faced man in his mid-40s, sat proudly upon his throne, his leather-brown chest proudly bearing the fine scars of old blood rituals. Around his neck he wore a dazzling golden collar embedded with turquoise and other precious stones. His headdress and cloak were made from brightly coloured quetzal feathers, and the fingers of both hands were adorned with finely crafted gold rings. He looked every inch the 9th emperor of the Aztec Empire. Moctezuma's hooded eyes barely blinked as the captive was ushered into the chamber by an entourage of heavily tattooed warriors, each carrying a club fletched with obsidian. The nobles and priests of his court gaped in amazement at the prisoner's white skin and blonde hair. This was the first Westerner they had ever seen. They called him Tlacatecuhtli, or one who comes from across the sea, although no one had actually seen him arrive by boat, nor were there any reports of him travelling through their kingdom. The stranger was a giant, taller than most of his men by nearly a head. He was dressed in a long leather coat and breeches with black boots that finished just below the knee. His fair complexion showed hardly any sign of being touched by the sun, not an easy thing to avoid when travelling the long, arduous journey from the coast. "My lord," the stranger addressed him fluently in their native tongue, "I come before you with the deepest respect and humility." He bowed his head and knelt before the emperor. Moctezuma slowly raised one hand to the guards, who were poised to strike the prostrate man down for his impertinence. The courtiers whispered amongst themselves, obviously astonished at his ability to speak their language so eloquently. Keeping one wary eye on the guards, the stranger drew a long silver blade with an ornately woven metal hilt and held it out to the king. "My name is Silas Wormwood, and I bring you this gift as a tribute and a token of friendship," he continued, using the reverential dialect of a nobleman. "It is forged from Toledo steel, the hardest and most deadly of all metals." Silas slowed his breathing. This was the moment of truth. Bowing his head, he closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, feeling for the consciousness of the emperor. For as long as he could remember, Silas had always been able to push people, a subtle adjustment of their mental state to tip things in his favor. It was a rare talent, but one that had saved his life on more than one occasion. The Aztec leader was no different from any of his other marks. His interest was already piqued by the beautiful weapon. Reinforcing the fascination was simple, like turning up the dial on a stereo. Silas opened his eyes and smiled. "Got you,"